Hi, I'm Kimberlyn. I would like to be your guide, a guide into the yoga practice and beyond. To take the yoga practice off of the mat and into the world, yes, but more importantly, into your real life. Learning to live the yoga principles is about learning to show up authentically and living intimately with inspiration, or as they say in yoga, living intimately with prana. Welcome to Storytime. I want to start with a poem by Eileen Olson, and it's in The Poetry of Yoga, which is volume 2, a recent gift to me from one of my teacher trainees. This poem is entitled Our Turn. I turned to yoga for stress and found peace. I turned to yoga for movement and found stillness. I turned to yoga for flexibility and found stiffness. I turned to yoga to escape and found love. I turned to yoga to find friends and found solitude. I turned to yoga to find happiness and found bliss. So this poem ends with one of my favorite words, bliss. I turned to yoga to find happiness and found bliss. Bliss is that progressive state within our meditation practice where union is experienced in that moment, that fullness of connection, that bliss, that ananda of oneness that yoga offers. So it's not uncommon that we look for practices, we look to cultivate habits and strategies to live more intimately with happiness and joy. But perhaps the irony is that by doing these practices, we find accidentally, or so my teacher taught me, land into a moment of bliss. Now, fleeting as it may be, once we've tasted bliss, we want it again. We want more. And each taste expands our understanding, expands our intimacy, expands our immersion into that bliss. And it becomes more accessible. We become accident prone by showing up to do the practice. The practice of breathing, pranayama, of moving, asana, in stillness and in flow, and resting. Resting the body, resting the mind, resting the spirit. Meditation. I'm Dr. Kimberlyn Cahill. I am a yoga therapist and a yoga teacher and teacher trainer. I'm here in Frederick, Maryland. And my life's work is to share the practices of yoga in a way that is integrated into daily living. It's not about learning the practices or the philosophies and the principles and leaving them there on the study pillow or the desk. It's about weaving them in to how we live. And story time, that's what this is. Story time is an opportunity to integrate stories to help us learn these lessons of yoga and the world for that matter, but to find ways in which they inspire us to show up more authentically, to show up at all in order to live the life that we have been given. I have a sign hanging in my studio and it says, "Going in is the way out." Now, this particular sign is a double entendre because it's at the front door, which we don't use for coming in and out of the studio because we're in a 1900 house and that door is right on the street that's passing by. You can sometimes hear the traffic. But that door is not our entrance into the studio. In order to maintain the cleanliness and the sacredness of the practice space, the entrance is on that side of the building. But going in is the way out. It's not just about going into the studio is the way out, but it's about going into our experience. So it's going into our attention. And so I love to integrate in words. Integrate, intention, inspire. But more importantly, that practice of going in starts with the inquiry, the investigation, the being with the questions, even if there may never be an answer. And even before the question, maybe it's the invitation. So Storytime is really my public invitation to you to join me in this practice of inquiry, of investigation, of introspection, to live the practices of yoga. And I like to use stories. Why stories? Well, because we connect with stories. They are reflections of our own life's experience, and we can resonate with others through empathy, through compassion, through, oh, that sounds familiar. In which case we can learn ways in which to live more authentically without having to necessarily through all of those scenarios. By learning through stories, we benefit one another. So I'm going to share stories that come from my personal life and experience, but as well those that have been shared with me by my clients and my students. I'm also going to share stories that come from the yoga tradition, the myths and the legends. But yoga in a broader spectrum is not just from India, and it's not just yoga. Yoga weaves in and out of all spiritual disciplines. And so Storytime will integrate some of those myths and legends from a variety of spiritual disciplines because, well, you're going to hear at some point, it's all yoga. At least it's all yoga to me. And I hope that I can make that clear to you as well. Thirdly, when we talk about stories, sometimes I show up with a children's picture book. Why? Because one, I love children's picture books, and because, like Robert Fulghum said, everything that we needed to learn, we learned in kindergarten. How to be kind, how to make friends, how to live together. And yet, so much of our becoming adults has taught us to forget much of those simple ways, not easy, but simple ways of being in communion, being in community. So yes, two primary objectives in Storytime and living intimately with inspiration is to first live authentically, knowing who we are. And then secondly, living in communion, living with others with a sense of union. And stories will help us to cultivate that connection, even if you and I never get the chance to sit side by side or face to face in the same shared room. I hope to reach those who don't have an opportunity to gather in their local studio, who can't find a circle that meets them where they're at on this journey of discovering, of introspection, of inquiry and investigation. So if you know others who could benefit from a little support, a little guidance, a little inspiration, I hope that you'll connect them with me here at Life's Work Yoga Studio, at YouTube channel, or in our virtual learning and practice studio, or even coming into our bricks and mortar studio here in Frederick, Maryland. I'm an academic at heart, right? And what I mean by that is I, one, love to study, and two, I prefer the academic calendar schedule. I like to begin again in September. Now, the truth is, I like to begin again in January. So don't get me wrong. January is a beautiful time to set new intentions and to carve out your calendar of events to reflect your personal values. But as an academic, September is the launch of the new study year. And so it's the launch not just of Storytime, it's the launch of our circle gathering communities, a yoga living circle for those who are integrating the yoga practice into their daily habits. In fact, that's based on 10 self-care practices, which are simply, or most simply, breathing, moving, and resting. Then we've got the women's circle, which is for those who identify as women looking to cultivate deeper relationship with others in a safe space, knowing full well that there might be some garbage to clean up or some truth to sort out in how we are showing up, but willingly showing up to practice authenticity and invite connection. And then thirdly, I've got the guru circle. Now the guru circle is kind of a continuation for those who go through the teacher training programs here at Life's Work Yoga, but it's also an outreach in terms of supporting those who are living yoga by way of their practice, of their service in the world. So whether they're a therapist or even if they're an accountant, if yoga is the way in which you make sense of the world, then the Guru Circle is a place to integrate those lessons into how you're living your dharma, your life's work. It's a combination of deep dives into the yoga journey and book study to integrate the teachings from our ancients as well as our modern writers to guide us in living well. My goal with Storytime is to keep things light, short and sweet, inviting and integratable, or directly accessible to a way in which it fits into your life. So by keeping it light, I often tell jokes. I think I'm funny. Sometimes they're not. That's okay, right? But by bringing in a levity, I want us all to remember that it doesn't always have to be super serious. We can get kind of caught up in our own drama and our own stories. And so opening up to the stories of others as a way to see from our witness perspective and to cultivate that sense of empathy and compassion for others will help us to also cultivate that same empathy and compassion, the metta, the loving kindness for ourselves. At least that's what I hope to help you discover for yourself. So join me each month and I'll share a Storytime lesson. I'll share a breathing practice, a meditation practice, and a movement practice based on a shared theme. And each month these will be posted on a weekly basis to the YouTube channel. But you can also dive in to our real-time services and offerings if you want to go deeper into a text that I've mentioned or the study of breathing, pranayama, meditation, introspection, discussion, study, all of those mind practices. And when we talk about the mind, we're talking about the brain and the head, the one in the heart and the one in the belly. So if you want to go deeper, maybe you and I have some one-on-one work to do. And if so, let's set up an inspiration checkup to see whether or not we're a good fit and if I can support you in living your best life. Thanks so much. I hope to see you back here again with each weekly share of practices to help you live intimately with inspiration based on the practices and principles of yoga. May you breathe deeply. May you move freely in body, mind, and spirit. May you labor lovingly. And may you know the joy and the bliss of living intimately with prana, of living vibrantly. Namaste. Thanks for allowing me to introduce you to me, to Life's Work Yoga, and to the ideas behind Storytime. I hope that we can walk this path together.